Hi, welcome to the third in the series called Core Curriculum for World Changers and History Makers. Now, up until now, we've looked at what time is it? We've had a look at the big picture of the world, and this week we have a look at the people in our world. In other words, our generation. For me, a generation is anyone who's alive right now. So when we looked at the world, we looked at a world with great opportunity. We looked at a world with loads of change. We looked at a world with access to creativity, and we looked at the geopolitical shifts. We just briefly looked at all of those. And again, quadrant, although I've got some quadrants within quadrants here for those who really like this stuff. We're going to have a look at the people, and I've just taken 4 elements which I think are unique and are distinctly different for those of us who are alive right now, our generation. And the first place I want to go, top right-hand corner, is actually the generations alive. I want to suggest to you that there has never before been a time in history where there are 4 distinct generations of people by age in this regard who are alive at the same time, who are so different in the way that they think, the way that they view their world, the way that they approach problems, the way that they solve problems, the way that they connect to other people. This is absolutely unique. Many of us have heard the terms, probably most likely we've heard Gen X and we've heard of millennials. But I add to this the traditionalists, the traditionalists who were born, somewhere just a little bit before the Second World War and a little time after, and then the baby boomers from the sort of after the Second World War right the way through to probably the late 60s, and then the Gen Xers and then the millennials, or some people call them Gen Y. Now, I don't want to draw too many lines of exactly when those people were born, but I do want to say this. They view their world very, very differently. They work very differently. They operate differently. And it's just important for us to understand that this is a huge shift. Around us, we've got people who've never known life without a cell phone, They don't really understand what those red boxes were for. Can't imagine that if they were out and they needed to make a phone call, they need to find a telephone box and make sure they've got some money in their pocket to make the call. Those sort of things are really interesting to have conversations. But perhaps more importantly are questions like, who's your first loyalty? The traditionalists, the loyalty would have been maybe to the country or to the organization they work for. The baby boomers would have been perhaps a loyalty to a smaller group within that. And the Gen Xers and the millennials, again, differences. Millennials, very often, their loyalty is to their friends, which is interesting when you think about it. That first place of loyalty would be with their friends, whereas many of us, our first place of loyalty would have been to our nation. And for somebody like me, although I'm more of a baby boomer, having worked as a civil servant, that loyalty to Her Majesty's government, Her Majesty's prison service. There are huge differences in the way that we work. The traditionalists very much would have been individuals. The baby boomers, I'll try and work in a team. The Gen Xers, I must be in a team. The millennials, I want to have fun in my team. These are differences. Of course, the traditionalists would have been very much, there's a traditional office, there's a 9-to-5 way of working, there's all of those set routines. The millennials, especially those privileged to find themselves working in the creative or the technology industries, some of them are working at very strange hours of the night because that's when their creative juices are flowing. They've got baristas on duty, they've got pool tables so they can take creative breaks, and they might be working at stand-up desks with treadmills beneath their feet. They're a few exaggerated examples, but they do exist. So we have these 4 generations that are alive who view the world differently, who view their work differently, who view their loyalties differently. And it's important for us to understand this, especially if we're working together as team. but I want to suggest to you this is a great opportunity. It's a little bit like for me when I think about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're these three patriarchs. Abraham kind of representing the wisdom generation. Abraham really that wisdom piece of the puzzle. Isaac, the resources. And Jacob, the youthful energy. Well, I think we can find this here again. And actually, if we're going to really become world changers and history makers, we are going to learn to harness the strengths. Again, this is one of those kind of pieces of my teaching where you can look at this and go, this is a problem, this is really difficult. Or you can go, no, let's harness the strengths of having four unique generations alive at the same time, who approach things differently, who have different loyalties, who have different ways of working. And if we can come together and collaborate for such a time as this, well, who knows what we can achieve. And so this is one way of looking at our generation. We live in a unique moment in history. And then the issues in our generation. Fascinating to me how, in some respects, it felt as though some of these issues had gone away a little bit. Maybe I felt we'd solved some of them. I've definitely worked in the prison service and have been trained in race relations, have been trained in equal opportunities, and yet what we're seeing is that these challenges have really risen up again, and some of them carrying huge injustice with them. And so we live in a moment with lots of change. Some of the movements that we see, the hashtag movements that we see, are connected definitely to race and gender. And of course, gender is not just the equal opportunities piece of it, but the whole issues of gender and of same-sex marriage and scenarios where people are taking gender away from the records that are kept about people in hospital. It doesn't say above a bed of a child in some hospitals, male or female. There are some incredibly challenging examples of change. So huge issues. The issue of course of money, I don't think will ever go away. Jesus said that it wouldn't ever go away. You'll always have the poor with you. But it is a huge issue again. Fascinating when you listen to people who talk from countries that appear from the outside to be poor, and yet some of those countries have some of the richest people. I was just listening to somebody talking about Nigeria the other day, and that they have the largest number of private jets in that country. Gosh, how does that happen? So the rich poor, that issue is there, hasn't gone away. And actually I put one up here that perhaps a little while ago I wouldn't have put up here, but there's an issue of truth today. There's an issue of moral truth. There's an issue of rational truth. Horrific to me that something like the Holocaust would be challenged by some people. People say, well, that's ridiculous. Well, there are people who challenge stuff like that. People who say that some of the things that have happened in our world were set up by governments and all of that, conspiracy theories and questions over truth and fake news and things like that. There's a challenge over truth. These are real issues in our world. The race issue, the gender issue, the money issue, the truth issue. We're a generation living right in the middle of that. And of course, as I've already said, 4 distinct generations who view things differently. And I would add to that as a generation alive, we are people who have access to more. I don't know that there's ever been a generation that's had as much access to information so quickly. Perhaps that's the real thing, is that we find out so quickly now. Our phones buzz with a news alert of something that's happening. And so we actually see scenarios. We don't just hear, oh, there was a hurricane 2 days ago and it devastated a country. We're watching the hurricane develop over days and watching the impact it has. So our access to news in that way, but our access just to information about just about anything has really shifted the way that we as people live, our access to information, our ability to communicate. So we have an incredible access to more. There's this Globalization is not just about our ability to travel around the world. It's about the diversity that is actually in our world, our access to more. A fun part of that for me would be food. Our access to ingredients for cooking. We have an access to so much more than we ever did. So we're a generation with access to more information, more ability to communicate. We're involved in the news much more quickly. We can find out within minutes of a tragic death of a movie star or a suicide or something like that. So we have, we're actually being pummeled with more. I've heard some people say, of course, that maybe the human being wasn't actually designed to have this much information, and definitely not this much bad news feeding us every day. So we are that generation, a generation with access to more. But this is probably the one that really excites me, and I would suggest that it actually touches on all of these. And that is that we're a generation with a desire to make a difference. There's something about this generation, both inside and outside of Christianity. There is this sense that I want my life to count. I want to make a difference. Of course, the access to more means that it's actually easier for people to jump on something from the small, from somebody who has a friend who goes through a crisis or needs help, and you can jump onto that and put a campaign out there on social media and raise money for someone and make a difference using that resource, to the bigger issues, the issues like sex trafficking, where again, the access to more, the access to more information, the awareness about the horrendous lives that the victims of this live. And it jumps straight in here, and people are able to think, I want to make a difference, because they know something, they're more aware of something that a previous generation wasn't aware of. And so these all actually do link together. And when I think about raising world changers and history makers, it is about raising up people who know how to work together. The generations alive know how to maximize our unique differences. That a generation who is aware, we're not ignorant of the real issues that happen, the injustices that happen in our world, the challenging issues that happen in our world. And of course we have the access to more, we're more aware of it, but most importantly is this, a desire to make a difference. And my challenge for you this week would be about this. It's like, where is there a desire for you to make a difference? Maybe it's to get in here and to be somebody who's helping to provide the quality information, the communication, and so that the more that's being provided is good quality more. Or maybe it's working together. Maybe it's you see this, and there are other issues I would add where there's an invitation to unity, to work together, to maximize our potential together. Or maybe it's an issue. Maybe there's an injustice issue and you want to see a wrong righted. You want to do something about that. But I just want to ask you, because as we go through this course, I'm really going to be helping you to discover what's inside of you, so that you start to realize, yeah, I'm that person. I do want to make a difference. Of course, it might just be in one person's life. And that, of course, is wonderful. Those of us that are parents, we've had the opportunity to raise children and to make a difference in their life, and for that to be passed on to others. A story I often tell was really me raising an awareness with my two sons, not deliberately, it just happened because of my job. An awareness that there were people who wanted to kill themselves, end their lives. And in my case, of course, they were prisoners in prison cells. And I can honestly say that my wife and I have raised two sons who have a very, very deep compassion in that area of feeling really sad and hurt when they hear of people who take their own lives. So it might be that we make a difference in one person's life, or it might be that we make a difference in a whole people group. We might make a difference to an injustice. But we are alive at such a time as this. This is our generation. This is us. This is different from our grandparents and our great grandparents' generation. This wasn't the case. The generations were divided by age alone. There wasn't much difference in the way that they thought or behaved or spent their time. Perhaps in the 60s, the generation gap was a moral gap. There was a moral gap. But this is unique. This is generations who actually think differently. And this is our moment. And of course, because of communications, we've become so much more aware of the issues in our world, the access to more. But we have an opportunity. We really do. We have an opportunity to make a difference, whether it's in one life or hundreds of lives, whether it's in one issue or many issues. We have an opportunity. So as I close this week, I just want to say to you, where's the area that you desire to make a difference? Where's the people group? And you can start with one. Maybe it is just the one person in your life. You want to make a difference there for them. And that's absolutely wonderful and beautiful and powerful and makes a difference. Or maybe there's something bigger that you want to engage with. But this is our moment. We weren't chosen to live on this planet at another time. We were chosen to live on this planet. You know, the Bible is very clear. God knew that He had chosen us. Before we were in our mother's womb, He knew who we were. We've been chosen to live at this moment, a moment of uniqueness in terms of the people, a moment of uniqueness in terms of the issues, a moment of uniqueness because we have so much more access to information and communication and the ability to do things even very, very quickly. And there is a desire. There's something inside of us right now, Christians and non-Christians alike, who are not prepared to live their lives and not make a difference and not count for something. So I want to challenge you. What is the difference that you want to make?